Darth Vader, one of the most iconic and complex characters in the Star Wars universe, represents the embodiment of darkness and the philosophical underpinnings of the dark side of the Force. His journey from the idealistic and hopeful Anakin Skywalker to the brutal, merciless Sith Lord serves as a powerful narrative of the potential and peril of embracing darkness as a source of strength. For Darth Vader, darkness is not just an external force. It is an essential aspect of his identity and his power. His philosophy is deeply intertwined with emotions like fear, anger, pain, and hate, which, when harnessed properly, can elevate an individual beyond the limits of humanity itself. Vader's philosophical outlook is built upon the idea that darkness is an inevitable part of existence. It is not something to be feared, suppressed, or avoided. Instead, it is something to be embraced, understood, and wielded as a tool to shape the universe. In Vader's eyes, emotions, even the so-called negative ones, are not inherently destructive. Rather, they are sources of immense power, fueling one's journey toward ultimate control and order. 1. The power of negative emotions, a source of strength. Unlike the Jedi, who advocate for the suppression and transcendence of emotion, Vader believes that the full embrace of negative emotions is the key to unlocking the true potential of the dark side. For him, emotions like fear, anger, rage, and hatred are not weaknesses. They are powerful forces that, when mastered, can provide an unshakable foundation for one's strength. The Jedi, in their pursuit of balance, are naive, blind to the reality that true power comes not from the absence of these emotions, but from their channeling. In Vader's world, emotions are the currency of strength. Fear, for example, is not something to be avoided, but rather something to be embraced and manipulated. As Vader's master, Emperor Palpatine, once said, "Fear is the path to the dark side." Fear serves as a motivator, an instinct that propels Vader toward dominance. It's a tool of control, a means to make others bow before his will. Anger, too, is a tool. Its raw, uncontrolled energy can be harnessed and directed to break barriers, destroy obstacles, and impose will on the weak. Vader, deeply scarred by personal loss, is driven by a profound anger that is inextinguishable. His hatred for the Jedi, for Obi-Wan, for the Senate, and even for himself, is a constant force. But this hatred is not his downfall. It is his strength. His rage fuels him, shaping his identity as an enforcer of the Emperor's will, and giving him the power to crush any opposition. 2. Loss of humanity, the price of absolute power. The descent from Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader is a philosophical and psychological transformation that involves the complete loss of humanity. As Anakin, he was once motivated by hope, love, and attachment. But when these attachments were threatened, by the loss of Padme, by his fear of losing power, and by the manipulation of Palpatine, he allowed himself to be consumed by his emotions. His connection to his human side, to his identity as a husband, a Jedi, and a man, dissolved. In its place emerged a new identity, Darth Vader, a machine, a cold, calculating enforcer of absolute order. The decision to become half-machine symbolizes the complete detachment from human emotion and vulnerability. In this way, Vader transcends his former self. He is no longer Anakin Skywalker, bound by the limitations of his mortality and emotion. He is Darth Vader, the Sith Lord, a being forged in darkness. The transformation is not just physical, but psychological, representing the ultimate surrender to the dark side. His cybernetic enhancements are a metaphor for his emotional and psychological scars. Where his body was once whole, now it is a cage, a prison for his soul. The loss of his humanity is not just a cost, it is a necessary sacrifice. In the logic of the dark side, to achieve power, one must give up the frailties of humanity, love, attachment, empathy, and embrace the cold, detached power of the Force. 3. Absolute power, the pursuit of order and control. For Darth Vader, the dark side is not about chaos, it is about absolute control. The Jedi believe in peace and balance, but these concepts are, in Vader's mind, naive and weak. Order is the true goal of the dark side, and it can only be achieved through absolute power. Vader's philosophy is grounded in the belief that only power can bring stability to a chaotic universe. Vader sees the galaxy in a state of constant disorder, with individuals and nations fighting for power, causing destruction and suffering. In his mind, only one who has absolute control over the galaxy can impose the order necessary to prevent further suffering. Democracy and freedom are weak. They are ideals that breed division and chaos. Power, centralized, absolute power, is the only force that can restore balance. This view of power comes with a cost. Vader is willing to sacrifice morality, empathy, and compassion for the greater good. The pain he causes is justified in his mind by the order he creates. His relationship with his son, Luke Skywalker, is an embodiment of this philosophy. Vader knows that in order to create order, he must break the cycle of weakness and rebellion, and he is willing to do whatever it takes, even if it means alienating the only family he has left. 4. The Shadow Self, the destructive power of unacknowledged darkness. Drawing upon Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self, Vader represents the danger of ignoring and repressing one's darkness. The shadow consists of the parts of ourselves we repress or deny, those dark emotions and impulses that we prefer to keep buried. But when we fail to acknowledge them, they don't disappear. Instead, they manifest in destructive ways, as seen in Anakin's fall to the dark side. Vader's journey is a tragic exploration of the destructive potential of the shadow self, his inability to come to terms with his inner conflict, the fear of losing those he loved, the guilt over his past actions, and the rage that fueled his transformation ultimately led him to the dark side. As a Sith, he sought power in order to dominate and control, believing that this was the only way to protect the galaxy. But in the process, he forsook his humanity and lost his soul. However, in his redemption arc, we see that the shadow self can be confronted and integrated rather than destroyed. Vader's final act of self-sacrifice for his son is not just a moment of emotional catharsis. It represents the reconciliation of his inner conflict. By confronting his dark side and choosing love over power, Vader transcends his past and becomes Anakin Skywalker once more, a symbol of hope and redemption. 5. The illusion of control and the cost of darkness. While the dark side offers immense power, it also comes with an inherent cost. Vader's journey serves as a cautionary tale. The pursuit of absolute control, unchecked by empathy or compassion, ultimately leads to isolation and emptiness. As powerful as he is, Darth Vader is ultimately a prisoner of his own choices. His belief in the necessity of control and order leads him to suppress his humanity, but in doing so, he is forever trapped in a cycle of loneliness, self-loathing, and regret. Vader's philosophy, while initially empowering, becomes his undoing. The power he so desperately craves is ultimately hollow because it is built on the suppression of his true self. The more he tries to control and dominate, the more he loses touch with the very things that could have given his life meaning: love, connection, and redemption. Conclusion: the paradox of power and redemption. Darth Vader's philosophy is an exploration of the duality inherent in the dark side. It offers power, control, and strength, but it also demands immense sacrifice and leads to profound isolation. The dark side of the Force is a path that leads to corruption, but it also offers the potential for transformation. Vader's fall to darkness and eventual redemption is a reflection of the tension between these two forces. between the desire for control and the need for connection. Embracing darkness and confronting the consequences, the paradox of the dark side. Darth Vader's journey through darkness is not simply a tale of power and triumph, but one of inner conflict and sacrifice. The philosophy of the dark side is defined by its unrelenting pursuit of control, order, and dominance, all fueled by the raw emotions of fear, anger, and hatred. These emotions are the catalysts for his ascent to power, but they also mark the beginning of his downward spiral into the abyss of loss, isolation, and regret. In embracing darkness, Vader, and by extension anyone who walks a similar path, must also reckon with the profound costs of such a choice. The core paradox of the dark side lies in its promise of strength. It offers an immense surge of power, an almost godlike ability to shape reality, dominate others, and impose one's will on the world. But this strength comes at a steep price, the surrender of one's humanity. In the pursuit of absolute control, Vader sacrifices the very things that make him human: love, empathy, connection, and ultimately, his own sense of self. The more he strives to bend the galaxy to his will, the more he becomes estranged from his true nature. This estrangement is the heart of the dark side's danger. Vader's physical transformation into a cyborg, his body now more machine than man, serves as a metaphor for his emotional and psychological detachment. He becomes a shell of his former self, a cold, calculating enforcer who no longer believes in the power of personal relationships or emotional bonds. His grief over Padmé's death, his inability to save her, and his fear of losing those he loves propel him into the clutches of the dark side. In that moment, he chooses the path of absolute power over the vulnerability of love, ultimately severing the very connections that once gave him purpose. However, the consequences of these choices are not immediate. At first, the dark side offers him power, immense, intoxicating power, to impose order on the galaxy, to protect his vision of peace by crushing any who stand in his way. But as Vader rises, so does his loneliness. The more power he accumulates, the more isolated he becomes. His former self, Anakin Skywalker, the hopeful, passionate Jedi, becomes a distant memory, buried under layers of armor, both literal and metaphorical. His quest for power transforms him into a being defined not by love or hope, but by fear, resentment, and regret. Yet in this darkness, there is a flicker of light, a sliver of hope that even Vader himself cannot fully extinguish. In the depths of despair, in the cold and desolate prison of his own creation, there remains the possibility of redemption. This is where the true paradox lies. Even in the heart of darkness, there is the potential for light. Even after everything he has done, betraying the Jedi, destroying countless lives, betraying his own sense of morality, Vader is still capable of change. The choice to embrace the light is never fully gone, even for one as deeply entrenched in the dark side as Vader. From destruction to redemption, a journey of transformation. Vader's story is not just one of power, but one of transformation. His fall to the dark side is not the end of his journey. It is merely a chapter in a much larger narrative. Through his choices, he becomes the very embodiment of the struggle between destruction and redemption. The destruction he causes throughout his reign as a Sith Lord is profound. His soul is destroyed, his relationships are shattered, and he loses the one thing that gave him true strength, his ability to love. However, it is in the face of his destruction that his path to redemption begins. The defining moment of his redemption comes when he is confronted with the love of his son, Luke Skywalker. Luke represents everything that Vader has forsaken: hope, love, compassion, and the belief that redemption is possible. Where Vader chose the dark side out of fear and anger, Luke chooses to believe in the power of love, and this belief is what ultimately becomes the catalyst for Vader's internal transformation. In the final confrontation between father and son, Vader's love for Luke overrides his devotion to the Emperor and the dark side. In that moment, he makes the ultimate choice to reclaim his humanity, to release the darkness he has held on to for so long, and to embrace the possibility of love and self-sacrifice. His death, the result of this act of selflessness, symbolizes both the end of his reign of terror and the beginning of his redemption. In giving his life to save Luke, Vader is finally able to rise above the consequences of his past actions. This act of redemption is not just a return to his former self, it is a transformation of his very soul. Vader's decision to act from a place of love rather than control is his final victory over the dark side. It is an acknowledgement that true power does not lie in domination, but in the capacity for love, forgiveness, and personal growth. In his last moments, as he dies, Anakin Skywalker is reborn. Control to release. Letting go of darkness. The journey from control to release is perhaps the most profound shift in Vader's philosophy. The dark side is built upon the desire to control everything, to manipulate and subdue the external world and the people around you. But Vader's final act reveals the true nature of power, the ability to let go. In his moment of self-sacrifice, he chooses to release the very thing that has sustained him for so long, his desire for control. In letting go of his need to control his destiny, to dominate his enemies, and to impose his will on the universe, Vader embraces the freedom of self-realization. The act of release, of surrendering to a higher cause, is what ultimately allows him to transcend the darkness that had consumed him for so long. It is in this final release that Vader achieves true freedom. Freedom from the shackles of fear, guilt, anger, and pain. His death is not an end, but a transcendence, a release of his attachment to the very things that kept him chained to the dark side. This transition from control to release is a core spiritual lesson that transcends the Star Wars universe. In many ways, it mirrors the journey that each of us must take in our own lives, embracing our inner darkness, acknowledging the power it gives us, but ultimately choosing to let go of it in order to experience true freedom. The path of darkness may promise power, but it is the path of release and self-transcendence that offers the greatest strength. The paradox of power, control, and redemption. The story of Darth Vader is a powerful metaphor for the journey we all face in confronting our own darkness and seeking redemption. His fall to the dark side is inevitable, a reflection of the human tendency to seek control in a chaotic world. However, it is also a journey of growth, a transformation from destruction to redemption, from darkness to light, from control to release. Ultimately, Vader's philosophy challenges us to confront our own shadow selves, the parts of us that we fear and suppress. It asks us to recognize the power that darkness offers, but also to acknowledge the cost it demands. And it teaches us that even in the depths of despair and destruction, there is always the possibility of redemption. The path of the dark side may offer strength, but it is only through the release of that darkness that we can experience true freedom and peace. In Vader's story, we find both a cautionary tale and a message of hope. Even the darkest of souls can be redeemed if they are willing to face their darkness, confront their pain, and choose to embrace the light once again.